Welcome everyone once again, and also welcome Courtney Hemhill, who's here with a beer.
I was told I could do this.
Yes, of course. To have a 45-minute talk, and then we have another one, and then a break when we'll have a closing keynote here, and I hope you will all stay for the after party with the nice prizes.
More beer.
And more beer, of course, and the Snap Tap and the arcade games and everything that's fun here. So please give a warm welcome to Courtney.
So this is probably the first conference talk I've ever given with a beer. So I'm going to use it just as a prop, nothing else. But thank you for giving me the satisfaction of drinking a beer and doing a talk. Can everyone hear me? Do I need this? Or do I need this for, okay. I'm gonna
It won't be the last one with a beer today.
I love that. Favorite conference ever. All right, so yeah, you almost need a beer because what we're going to talk about today is management, something that typically isn't the most exciting subject in the world. I think all of us love coming to these conferences because we hear about new technologies and new techniques and new tools, and they're really fun. And management is something that oftentimes we kind of look at and we're like, that's really boring. I have sort of probably grown a healthy disdain for management for most of my career because I've been a software developer. And I sort of always thought about management as this. So people that wear suits and ties, nothing against people that dress very nicely in suits and ties because it looks fabulous. But it was always sort of this feeling of watching these people going in and out of meetings, being on the phone all the time. And I was kind of like, what are you doing? What are you producing in this world? And I sort of had this smug satisfaction of, I write code, I'm creating change in this world, I'm delivering features, I can see the end result of my work in the products that I see people using and the ones that I'm building. So I sort of was like making my choice. I am a developer, I write code, I don't want to have anything to do with all those meetings and all those phone calls, I'm going to stay in the code. But what I started to realize over time was, you can't just write code alone. I spent a lot of my career working solo, independently, particularly early on. I was a consultant, freelance. I'd sort of, gun for hire. I would work for anyone. It was great for me because I learned a ton. I got to learn from a bunch of different companies. I got to learn from a bunch of different code stacks. But what I realized was really big, impactful things happens when you code with groups of people. So it's really hard to develop any products in this world that have any real impact as a solo developer. So what that sort of means is you have to get into management. Whether or not you like it, as a force multiplier, management allows you to do bigger and better things. Even if you stay within technology, understanding how to cooperate with others and how to think through productive ways of releasing features, that's management. So the reality is great things aren't done by lone wolves. Even the smartest developers are empowered by those that they partner with. So you have to start thinking about it. Great tools, great products, great companies, they're built because of great management. But management is actually really hard. And it's interesting now because there's a dearth in the industry of great developers, period. But there is an outsized gap in the amount of great leadership in technology and those that can supply that great leadership. And there's sort of a reason as to why I see this happening, at least. I'm curious to have discussions with any of you over more beers later as to what you're seeing over here. This is my first time in Croatia. It's beautiful. People are doing some really cool things, so excited to talk to you all. But this is typically what we've seen in Silicon Valley. So a little bit of background on myself. I am a software developer by training. I started developing in '99. I worked for an early stage startup in Web 1.0 that eventually became art.com. I since then have been a consultant at Carbon 5. I am now a partner and what we call a technical lead at the company. So that means I work with various clients on various technology in various capacities, which is very confusing. So what that means is sometimes I'm working in Node and I am developing in Node. Sometimes I'm leading a team of people that is working on Golang projects for an API that we're delivering for a company like Compass. Sometimes working in blockchain. So we're working with Coinbase, we're working with SharesPost, we're working with Filecoin and Protocol Labs. So it's a really crazy amount of different things that you get involved in. But the commonality in all that is working with these big groups of developers. So early on when I started in '99, typically, my experience was working with larger teams in one monolithic application, generally with a limited set of management at the top. We now see sort of the Amazon dynamic, and what we all know is two pizza teams. Has anyone heard that phrase? Does that Yeah? Okay. So we work in smaller teams now. We have service-oriented architecture, also known as microservices. Typically, most of the technology we are working with now eventually moves its way into some sort of service-oriented architecture. So you have smaller teams, and this comes with a great advantage. These teams can work independently. They can deploy autonomously. They have a lot of ability to move quickly. So companies are happy because everything's moving a lot faster. Problem is, these different teams have to coordinate with one another, and they need great management and great leadership in order to do their work. But there's not always great managers that are at these companies, and also there's no place to just easily get the kind of skills you need to be a great manager. When you run into difficult problems in code, you're dealing with the bug, you're trying to trace it, you jump onto Google or Stack Overflow or get on your Slack channels and kind of be like, hey folks, who's seen this tricky problem? It's a lot harder to do that when you're like, hey folks, I just had my direct report come to me and give me this tricky problem and I don't know how to solve it, right? It's much more sensitive and it's harder to get solutions for those problems. So what do we do, right? As managers, when we start to look at our career paths, this is sort of what we see to be the progression, if you will. And this is what I thought I was going to go through. So when I started out, I was an individual contributor. I was checking in code. I was deploying. Eventually, I sort of got to be a team lead. So I was leading small teams, oftentimes with startups that we were working with. Oftentimes those startups would grow. So then I would lead bigger teams. Now I'm in the position where I'm sort of leading teams of teams. So this is sort of what I thought the experience would feel like, right? These different levels of people would kind of support me as I went up in my career. This is a reality. It feels like the whole world is falling down on your head, right? So effectively what this is you've got everyone's responsibility falls down to you. And when you first become a manager, it can feel like the entire world of stress is falling down onto your head. And it can be scary too, because you don't necessarily have techniques and tools that you can jump to just solve for all of these stressful problems that are coming at you every day. So I have a piece of good news, right? This is the bad news, because it is. It's a lot of work, it's a lot of stress, it's a lot of responsibility that you carry with you all the time. The good news is there is not just one path. So this is a very complicated graph, but it's really simple. What it's meaning to say is there's a lot of different paths that you can take. Oops, I think this thing died. Is it back? Yeah, okay. There's a lot of different paths you can take. You don't have to go into people management. I think I hear a lot of developers that are amazingly talented. They're very considerate. They work wonderfully with teams, but they never want to manage others. They don't want to be responsible for another human's career development. But they are fantastic at working with teams to come up with solutions, particularly with tricky architectural problems. So don't think that if you go into management that it's a dead-end path. You can jump around, and I have seen multiple leaders that I collaborate with that have done this exact thing. But these are typically the paths you see, right? As you stay in the industry, as you do more and more work, you're going to be asked to take on more responsibility if you're willing to do it. So taking those stretch projects are going to lead you into one of these paths. So the other good news is you all have a lot of these skills already. The great thing is, as software developers that collaborate with others, we've had to develop protocols and processes and ways of interacting that do have a translation over into management. And so what I want to do today is sort of jump through some of those parallels and give you some of the tools and techniques that have been given to me by folks that I have directly worked with, individuals at these companies that I've gotten to work with, and hopefully some of these will help you along your way. If nothing else, they're kind of fallback techniques when you're sort of in the weeds and lost and really stressed. So curious to hear your feedback, but they kind of fall into three buckets. So the first is around communication. This is really your foundations. Learning how to productively communicate with others in a clear way. As developers, we are in the weeds. You are getting the very finite details and the granular minutia of development. If you try to give all of that information to someone on the business side, you've lost them in the first 5 minutes. So learning how to communicate well with others in the business is really important. Second, you gotta care about the business. People that are empathetic to the end customer are ultimately gonna be very successful in their careers because they're focused on the business value. And you can write the coolest, most, ultimately simplified abstraction that everyone is in awe of at your company, and it won't matter if the customers don't care. So you really kind of have to think about these things. And then the last one is truly the hardest one. Motivations, how you motivate others, how you get respect from others. This is something that can't necessarily be taught. There's no tool. And it's really the delta between someone that is managing things and someone that is leading. So kind of thinking about this and how you want to evolve in your own style as a leader is important to slowly develop your skills in. Right, so communication. I wanted to first give credit to a lot of wonderful individuals that have given me these tools and tips. One of them is a fellow named Michael Deering. He is from a school of general management. He's also a venture capitalist. But for a lot of his portfolio companies, he saw these commonalities. So he's worked with people from Twitter and Slack and a variety of these other companies that we now know well. And he's just seen kind of what great management looks like. And he also ended up teaching at Stanford. So a lot of these came from a school that I took with him called General Management. And it's called Harrison Medal is the class. So I will have these resources online if you guys want to go and look into some of this stuff afterwards. But one of the first folks that he introduced me to is a woman named Barbara Minto. So Barbara Minto she was back in the 60s. She had a couple of really notable firsts. So she was one of the first women to graduate from the Harvard Business School. She was also one of the very first, actually the very first consultant at McKinsey. And it was during her time at McKinsey that she came up with some wonderful techniques to help with communication. And one of these is called the pyramid principle. So as a developer, it's really fun when you can find like a logical progression to work through something that feels complex or illogical. Communication can oftentimes feel very overloaded, emotional, and illogical. This is a fantastic way to kind of put yourself through a model. What she says is, back to my original point, before you get into the details, which are your bottom layer, first simplify your point and make it at the beginning of any message, of any communication, and then start layering in the arguments and the details for that. Another thing, I'm going to cruise through these pretty quickly because I don't have a lot of time, is this. Oh, yeah. I loved how you asked that. Yeah, here you go. Got it? Yeah, I know, right? I'm juggling too many things. Okay, so the next one is, this is how I write emails a lot of the time. Oftentimes, it's a complicated situation. It's hard to describe it easily. If you can very succinctly describe a situation where it is an imperative, meaning it is, it's obvious to all. You're sort of basing everything in a factual reality. This is the situation as we all can understand it. You then can introduce the complication as you see it from your vantage point. From that, generally, a question will naturally arise. Oftentimes, it's rhetorical. Sometimes you can state it. This is such a fantastic way to get someone to give you an answer very quickly and to not have to have 9 different emails going back and forth. Right. Feedback. This is maybe one of the hardest ones. So when I first took on direct reports, meaning people that reported to me, that I was responsible for developing their career, one-on-ones and giving these people feedback became a very emotional, scary thing, right? Code's so fantastic. It's binary. Your tests pass or they fail. It's easy. Not so with humans. So we worked with this woman. Her name is Kim Scott. She wrote a book called Radical Candor. It's kind of super popular in Silicon Valley right now. It is a fantastic tool, though, and the core of it is this, really. 2x2 matrix, and this is to help you understand how you're giving feedback. So oftentimes, you can care very deeply about the people that you're managing, but if you care so deeply that you cannot tell them and show them where they have room to grow, you kind of fall into this ruinous empathy field. And you're not helping anyone there, right? They are not progressing in their career. They're not developing their skills. You're not getting a better employee that's helping you do better work. So you want to try to move more to where you're challenging them, finding ways to give them to how they can do better at their job, challenging them to be even better. There is also a common thing that I see with many managers where you fall into, oh my God, I'm really stressed. There's a milestone coming up. I have a lot of stuff to deliver. And so you are challenging all the time. And you lose all the empathy in the people that you are managing. You are now in that obnoxious aggression. So it's really important kind of assess yourself, and the true reality here is it's not necessarily how you think you're giving feedback. This is how it's perceived in the folks that you are delivering it to. So you kind of need to calibrate with them, right? You need to be a little bit vulnerable and ask the folks that you're reporting to, am I being obnoxiously aggressive in my feedback to you, or are we kind of hitting sort of a nice balance? So this is a good way to calibrate your feedback. Another thing, how many folks here run reflections or retrospectives, or I'm not sure what you call them? Okay. I gotta say, this is probably the best way to manage a team, right? When your team is getting super dysfunctional, run a reflection, and this is how you can start to recalibrate and improve the process over time. It also gives you a nice little gut check. There are gonna be people on your team that just aren't super communicative, and it's fine, they don't need to be. Doing a reflection where everyone can kind of isolate themselves, write down their feedback about the project, and bring it to the table. You remove bias from the situation, you allow everyone to have a voice, and you can understand where the nasty dynamics are at play in your team. Another thing that we built at Carbon 5 was this thing we called Product Dartboard. There are really sort of 12 dimensions to think about when you're creating a product and also when you're running a team or managing a team. And these are also important to calibrate against, right? If you've got folks on the team and they don't understand clearly what the roles and responsibilities are for all the different people that are on the team, this includes legal perhaps, this includes business analysts, whoever you have on your team, if there aren't clear roles and responsibilities, you're gonna run into trouble. Equivalently, there's also all these other dimensions. If there's not shared respect, if people aren't capable of debating and deciding together, all of these really play into how a team can function and be efficient. So having each and every person complete this independently and anonymously is really powerful, because what you start to understand is maybe not everybody's saying it, but when you measure it, you'll start to see these really big deltas between half the team has no idea the purpose of what it is that they're building, whereas the BAs and the product owners are like, it's obvious, of course. If the developers don't understand this, A, they're not going to be really motivated, and B, they're probably going to be coding in a way that's not really in line with the goals of the product. So this is online, it's free, productdartboard.com. All right, moving on, business results. So has anyone here ever heard of a book called it's called Drive, and it's written by a guy named Daniel Pink? Cool. So I would recommend it if you're getting into management, mostly because it sort of helps you understand how people are motivated, what drives them. And one of those things that we see is that people are really driven by purpose. And purpose comes when people release something into the world and they see its effect, right? They get motivated either, oh, that didn't work, I'd like to do better, or wow, the business is growing fast, I feel really successful in my career and what I'm doing. So these are some of the things to consider. And one of the fellows that I find to be really interesting, he's been around for forever, Andy Grove, built Intel, clearly took it to quite a successful organization. And he has this book called High Output Management. And in it, he was an engineer. And so he thought about management from this really technical perspective. And one of the things he came up with was this notion of OKRs, which is goals, objectives and key results. We rolled this out at Carbon 5. We have helped some of our clients roll it out. It's a really powerful way to understand, based on what you want to be doing, are you actually getting there? Because oftentimes we kind of can plan and have an objective and release against it, but we actually didn't do a fantastic job of measuring, or we didn't do it often enough to really start to course correct along the way. So OKRs effectively stand for objectives and key results. Some of the core tenets that are part of OKRs are that they need to be prioritized. So if you come up with a ton of different goals, chances are your attention is scattered in a bunch of different directions. The other thing is that they need to be time-bound. This is something from Agile, or really just kind of like Lean in general. Measure yourself as often as you possibly can and be confident that you have results that are those that you can measure first and foremost, but also those that are actually true, because oftentimes we can create numbers that are fabricated. I will say developers, as I have seen both in estimation as well as in OKRs, are fantastic at gamifying the system. So the last point, never tie this to bonus or compensation. People will absolutely figure out a way to take that system and use it to their own effect. So I hope there will be a day where I don't have to show this, because we have diverse teams across the board universally. On our way to that, we have to really think through diversity on each and every one of the teams that we have. And this isn't just gender diversity, it's not just ethnic diversity, this is diversity from people from different backgrounds, people from different socioeconomic places. It's so important because this allows us to have better solutions, because we are thinking across the spectrum of humanity. The other good news is that it really matters from a business perspective, right? The numbers are in. So this is a 2018 study by McKinsey on 366 public companies. And the results came back that 15% gender diverse companies perform 15% better. Ethnically diverse companies perform 35% better, and it's a dollar amount. These are profits, 8% in the United States, 3.5% in the United Kingdom. So it is important. There is a bottom line reason to do it. How do you do it? So a lot of the problem that we see in diversity comes from this notion of implicit or unconscious bias. So we end up, through the course of evolution, in a both wonderful but complicated situation where our brains have developed this fantastic way to filter all of the responses and signals that we're getting constantly. So we process like 1 million signals every second. And in order for us to process that fast, and so when we're running through the jungle and a tiger is to our right, we run out of the way. We develop like systems one thinking. That allows us to think really quickly and do the thing that we need to do. Systems two thinking is when we have the time and the luxury to sit down and assess. And so what we need to make sure that we're doing is that we are thinking through our decisions when we are hiring people, when we are creating workplaces that are inclusive of all. So some of the things to do, everyone talks about the pipeline problem. It's tough, for sure. But look outside your usual typical places. Also, look outside the places that everybody else is looking for candidates, right? Get diverse in your thinking about how to fill your pipeline. Also, go to meetups that you don't normally go to. Don't go to meetups. People that have kids and families aren't going to be at meetups after work. So think through that when you're looking to hire for your companies. Another thing, people tend to make a snap judgment in the first 5 seconds of either reading a resume or meeting a candidate. And they tend to spend the next 55 minutes just finding evidence to confirm that first judgment. And there's plenty of studies that show this. So be sure that you have some sense of a rubric system to assess your candidates. So candidate 1 and candidate 2 have the same rubric assessment patterns. And also, you're coming up with rubrics that are important for the job that they're going to do. So it's not like, oh, this person's going to be great to go skiing with on Saturday. It's, can they do the job? Finally, what has benefited me are advocates for me, mentors that I had in my career that would look at the skills that I wanted to develop and then find stretch projects for me. So projects that were just outside my comfort zone, but they knew I could probably handle them or find the resources that I needed to do so. So find people on your team that have the aptitude and the skills and the drive, and then find them stretch projects and advocate for them. Finally, create inclusive environments. Oftentimes we tend to, initially when we're small teams, I see this happen at so many startups, you decorate the office as the first 3 founders want to decorate it. So you end up with a bunch of like Star Wars posters or something like that. As you build up your team, make sure that that environment is inclusive of all. It's inclusive of all religions, backgrounds, genders. There's going to be a time and a place when someone just had a baby. Like, find a room for them to go and breastfeed. There's going to need to be a timeout room for people that are just really stressed. So think through the ways to make an environment more inclusive of all. So this is the hardest one. This is the one that really kind of you step into a leadership role. How do you motivate people, right? There's not just one trick, and there's so many coaches and books and whatnot that you can write or read about motivation. It is the great force multiplier. It is the way that you can take a team of 3 and make that team look like a team of 15 because they are highly motivated to do a thing and they're clear about what it is that they want to do. But this is hard. It's hard to understand how to do this. One of the great things is, as a mentor, as a leader, as a manager, understanding how mentorship works. Mentorship isn't just something where you're mentoring those that are earlier on in their career than you are. It's also thinking about yourself and how to continually progress your skills as a manager and a leader. So it's really kind of an axis, 3 ways. So one is, as I mentioned, being a mentor to others, those that are coming up in their career. But it's also ensuring that you're finding people that are on your level, people at the same place in your career, people that are dealing with the same problems that you are, people that are similar-sized companies. There's actually like a ton of Slack channels now that you can join. I'm on a bunch of these where you're coming up with a situation and you need help or you need a resource or whatever it is, and you can jump into this Slack community and people are really amazingly helpful. And this is kind of another way that you can help level up your skills and learn from others. And then finally, you also need to learn. And you can learn clearly from those that are further on along in their career than you, but you can also learn by teaching. You can learn a lot by those that are earlier in their career that are going to sort of show you things that you might not have thought of before. So really thinking kind of about the 360 or 3 dimensions of how to kind of continue mentorship for yourself. This is an interesting one. Psychological safety. Effectively, this is ensuring that the people that are on your team, they can take some risks, that you're not always in there managing everything and ensuring that stuff is done right. So managing risk is tough, right? We've worked with a lot of companies that are in the financial services industries. Even we recently worked with Coinbase, like delivering some stuff that was pretty high output, so highly risky. But you can do things to help your team understand where the guardrails are. So where is sort of the paddock in which they can kind of like run amok and try things out in a loose weight manner and come back to you with the results of what they're trying, which is incredibly powerful. And then figuring out what are the things that you need to manage, right? So there are going to be certain stories, certain features, certain implementations that are going to be of bigger risk either in a public deployment or if you're doing internal work to teams that are probably all like processing that API. So yeah, that's me climbing. I'm a big climber. So you have to manage risk sometime, and the way you manage it is that you ensure you have the right tools. So in both of these cases, in the first situation, I can kind of manage the risk independently, right? I clearly see where the edge is, and I know to stay away from it. In the second, I've gone over the edge. But what I have is a bunch of tools, i.e. in this case, rope and cams and whatnot, to manage my risk. So this is something as a manager where you're working with bigger teams to sort of figure out what are the tools. There's a ton out there. There are things like, if you're testing in production now, there's things like canary deployments and Chaos Monkey, and I can go into the technical pieces at another time, but this is something that I found with companies that are moving really quickly. This is a really big one to ensure that you're instilling in your teams. And then this is probably the biggest one and the hardest one. So it can be really tough because when we're going through life, we oftentimes get into, you go in the door of your office, you get your coffee, and it's game time, right? And so you sort of put on your work face. And you can oftentimes sort of lose your sense of humanity. You've got stuff to do, come on everybody, let's get together, let's do this. And you sort of lose this understanding of kind of what's happening in the other team. I think things to think about are, how can you continue sort of to uphold values and ethics and represent those yourself? So always not just telling people this is the way we want to be, but you have to walk the talk. You have to actually adhere to those values and ethics that you stated are really important. If you don't, your team is going to lose respect. So you have to be clear about what those are, have the team understand and respect what those values are, but you also have to ensure that you're constantly keeping in line with those values and representing them. This is really the thing that will keep teams trusting you, loyal to you, respecting you, working with you, excited to be a part of your efforts. If you're not doing this, you're going to lose respect of the team. The team is going to start to see hypocrisy. They're going to start to see decisions that are made that they don't understand because they're falling outside of this code. So show up, be a good human, be self-reflective, start to kind of consider whether or not there are decisions that you're making that sort of fall outside what you might normally do. And if they do, because they always will, it's not a perfect world, this is like in a vacuum, perfectly ethical, perfectly virtuous, there are going to be tough decisions, but be transparent with your team about them. Let them know why the decision had to be made. A lot of the time people are like, I don't want to let my team know that because it's like the dirty secrets of the business. If you don't let them in on some of those details, you're just going to lose them in the long run. So finally, a couple pitfalls that I've sort of seen along the way. This is not a full data set, there's tons, but these are some of the ones that are pretty common. First, I did this a bunch to start. You'll end up getting into leadership, particularly when you're still in the code a lot, and you're like, oh man, all these people problems are really stressful, and I don't want to write that email, and I don't want to do that presentation, so I'm just going to code. I'm just going to dive back into the code. Try not to do this. It is your happy place. It is fun. Over time, though, you're going to end up contributing. Like, you'll start a branch, you'll be coding, and then 5 days later, you had a bunch of stuff get handed to you that you need to deal with, and the team is like, are you going to merge that branch? Because you're really far behind. So try to not get too deep in the code. One thing that I've seen people do really effectively is, and it doesn't sound glorious, but you kind of end up doing the cleanup around the team. So you stay in the code, you understand what's going on, but maybe you're dealing with some like data cleanup, or maybe you're dealing with some integration with a third party. It's a quick thing, you can pick it off, you're still with the team, you understand what's going on, but it's quick, and you can deliver it, and you can merge it back in, and the team isn't waiting on you. Other thing, try not to get caught in the complexity. I think a lot of managers want to like make a big bang, and so they'll go after like shiny new technology or a really complicated project, and they'll overcomplicate it. try not to do this. Go for the small stuff, easy wins. Know when you're choosing technology that's appropriate for the business. And then finally, a lot of the time it can be really difficult to get into management because you feel like you're going to lose the respect of the team around your technical skills. I've got imposter syndrome up the wazoo, but try to understand that it's important for you to lead the team, right? The work that your team is doing is the real outcome. And so if you can lead them to do their best work, your work is going to be better as a result. So try not to pick up pet projects. Try to work really well with other leaders in the company. And try to not be condescending to others, particularly even if you're in a world where you know the technical solution and you're trying to get others to understand it. Understand that they need to be brought into your understanding, your world of view. Try not to be condescending to them. So finally, not everyone has to manage humans, but personally, I think that this quote kind of made it pretty succinct for me. Management is the opportunity to help people become better people. Practice that way, it's a magnificent profession. So I've got a couple resources that I will put online from this deck. You can get in touch with me. I don't know if my Twitter is anywhere in there, but I'm C. Hempel on Twitter. So I'll post these slides, and if you have any questions, I'll be around drinking this beer. So come and feel free to say hello. Love to talk to you all. Thank you.
We have 10 more minutes for Q&A. Okay, we have 10 more minutes for Q&A, so shoot.
Marianne, she has the first question. She was talking about fears and death, and one guy almost asked how to overcome the fear of death. So I'm going to launch a similar question to you, very difficult one, about management in a startup environment which is online. So this is my problem now, current, and nobody would say I'm 45 now. You can clap or whatever. But yeah, it's and I'm trying, in addition with my digital rights activism, in my political and tech consultancy work, I'm really trying to blend in some of those startups who are working online and dealing with peer-to-peer technology, because decentralized web is my passion. But it's bloody difficult because they all want you to have skills from the day one. In online environment, how do you support? How do you engage? How do you teach? How do you learn? If you're in the office and somebody just shows you one click, and then for that to happen in online environment, they tell you, look, the YouTube videos, yes, you spend whole day about one click, and then you eventually don't figure it. And also team communication, so I don't know if you have any kind of this overcoming the fear of that answer.
We're working, are folks familiar with a company called Protocol Labs or Filecoin? It's a blockchain distributed web platform. All right, so the distributed web is something, and I'll use that as one example because it is like the ultimate in distribution. But another one is, we've worked with clients that are all over. So Stitch Fix is one of our clients. We've worked with them for 4 years. We worked with them when they were a startup. And they ended up, it's really freaking hard to hire right now. And so they had to figure out, how do we hire for people that are not just in the hotbeds of Silicon Valley or New York or Chicago, what have you. So a lot of distributed communication, a lot of pull requests, contributing to Git and having conversations in the code itself is, one of the first things that's easy for us all to attack. All of these teams, even GitHub, which is by its very nature, right, was built as a distributed company and a distributed team, they get together in person, right? So Filecoin, we just all had the team go to, where were they? Scotland. So the entire team went to Scotland, spent like 5 days just in the thick of it, coming up with solutions, and all of our team came back sick. So it's intense, right? Like, you're with these people and you're working really hard. You cannot not get away if you are working with people for any length of time without some in-person interaction. So you need to get together. GitHub does their summits twice a year. Stitch Fix does summits with the entire company, also with individual groups. They have their own little summits. So it's really important to kind of have that in-person time to set the communication foundations and kind of understand, this sounds strange, but sort of like behaviors that people, like emotional kind of face and gestures that people do in real life will translate if you're having like a Zoom call or an online video call. You'll kind of be able to understand what that person is feeling a bit better once you've met them in person. So that's what I would say. Try to get in person with these folks, like organize something where it's central and you can all get together for a couple days. Or
No, I know the people are doing that, but if you are a developer, it's much easier because your nature of your work is more individual. It's not
totally true, but like if you're in non-coding profession, if you're in support profession, and if you need to integrate, I'm talking about integration capacity, which is much better in proximity.
Yeah.
But if in addition you are transitioning in mature age and you have all desire, ambition, everything you want to do, but you just cannot because there is no proximity. So I found it very cruel also
Yeah.
from time to time,
I don't have an easy answer. I mean, I think your situation is just hard, but
Yeah,
I would also say to try to find tools online that help to, like facilitation tools. We use this thing called stickies, which is like literally an online sticky board that's like real time. You can see people moving and writing on the stickies board, coming up with, if you're doing like design stuff, definitely taking advantage of all the things like, I'm not a designer, so I'm going to kind of blank here.
Envision app or something.
Thank you, Envision app. So yeah, I think those are figuring out the tools that you can use, and then do like you do, test, right? Be like, is this tool something that is helping with communication? Nope, that didn't work. How about this one? Using Slack, I would say the other thing I see, people that work on remote teams that are overly verbose and communicative on things like Slack and email definitely get more buy-in. They get more, attention, and they get more sort of people understanding, what they're trying to do.
Okay, more questions?
I'm just curious, how was your transition when you transitioned from a pure coder, programmer, to management programmer? I mean, I always think to myself, if I switch from, a pure coder's job to something like management, that you kind of lose yourself a bit.
Number one thing.
Yeah.
So I think you have to be really honest with yourself about what drives you. I think for me, what I recognized was I like coding and technology abstracted one layer. So although I really love contributing, like literally writing code, I really love the architectural decisions, and I like big systems, and I like scale. And so what I recognized was my opportunity to get into those types of conversations and kind of do more architectural work required me to go up a level, because that allowed me to sort of see a bigger scope, right, working across teams. I would say, though, that what I see as a wonderful career path for people that want to accelerate their career, i.e. get paid more and move up in levels, is architectural or like a chief scientist role. So we have, someone at our company that is effectively like a chief scientist, they're principals, and they are, the go-to people for like a specific technology. So whether or not it's, Android or iOS, or maybe they're really good at blockchain stuff or machine learning, they are like the go-to people. And so you become a mentor and a manager, not as people directly reporting to you per se, but you become the source of truth really for the company as to what is the approach for this type of technology. So I've seen, Google has like, engineer 1 through 7, Facebook's the same. So like you can progress in your career there also. You don't have to get into management and then you stay in code. So, but I would also say you can jump in and out. So there's a lot of different paths to take, and it's fine to kind of try management and see if you like it, and if you decide not, no one in today's age is going to be like, no, we don't want you to code. Like, everyone's hiring coders. We'll hire you.
Okay. Further questions? You come all the way from America and only 2 questions? Ah.
This is actually not a question, maybe just an idea, but you mentioned chaos monkeys. What do you think about, because this is an idea I have, and what do you think about, okay, you establish something with your team, and you are not sure is it correct or not. People may be doing that because of you told them to, and then you introduce, like, completely shut down that. And this is, I call that chaos monkey. And then if I receive like several emails or like Slacks, why we are not doing that? So this is like my proof of concept that what we tried, what I was like thinking it was a good idea, it actually is, because people are complaining. So this is just about like a thought. It was not a question, but what do you think about it? Because how to test? It's very it's not technical. Yeah. How to test it.
And in this case, you're thinking of testing an idea or a process?
Whatever. a process which you try to establish to make your team work better. Yeah.
I mean, I think I'm a big advocate for continually like tweaking processes, trying out features, and I think it's important for every company to build that muscle internally. So how you can make sure that people can test things out. I think also it's important for the company to be able to time box those things, so constrain them, place constraints on those ideas. No matter what, you are going to have to show results for ideas that you're testing out. And so if you feel like, oh, this is greatly successful, people really like it, but no one else has bought into those results, it's going to be hard for you to continue that work. So it's critical for you, and sort of back to those objectives and key results, to early on understand the baseline, like what is the problem? Clearly state the problem so that the entire business and those people that you want to either buy into this idea and allow you to continue to work on it, that they will agree that those results would give you further investment of time in that thing. So state the problem, state the objectives, state what the results will be, and then figure out how you can test that out. So whether it's not through, communication mechanisms through Slack, or coming up with a new process that you can try out. But if you can say, I'm going to start running this meeting, or I'm going to facilitate this thing, and I'm going to do it once a week, and what I expect to happen is that 5 more people will join that meeting next week, and they are going to learn in these ways, and it's going to be represented in the business this way. If you can prove those results and the business cares about those results, the likelihood is you've been successful. If you can't do those things, clearly the business is going to be like, we only have so many resources. We can't commit to that thing. You can try something else and see if you get those results in a different way, but you have a constraint of this time. So you sort of have to think through those things. I think it is important to get businesses to learn to be experimental. Everybody talks like the word innovation. Innovation comes if you try stuff, right? Something that is not known to the company. You have people in the organization that are incentivized and given the time to try things out in a lightweight manner. But you also have to recognize that, as someone that is in that world that is trying those things out, you have to put some constraints on yourself, and the business is absolutely going to constrain you. They might not tell you initially that they're going to constrain you, but if they don't see something happening, they'll just shut it down before you know it. So kind of like understanding that dynamic, understanding what's the time constraint, what are the resources I have, what is the objective, what are the results, do we all agree that this is worthwhile? Go. Like, do that plan first and foremost, and then go and do that stuff. Did that answer your question? Any other questions? Yeah.
Yeah. So as you move from the coder to the management, and you start to develop your management and soft skills, do you have a feeling that your technical skills are falling behind? You're not catching up with the latest technologies.
Nobody's catching up with the latest technology.
No, not all, of course.
That's a common fear.
Yeah, I mean, you have it if you're in the back end, right? If you start to do, platform stuff or infrastructure stuff, you're like, oh crap, I don't know what this React thing is. And then you'll have to do a course on the weekend and figure out what React is. So it's the same kind of, technology is complicated, organizations are complicated. I think what I do now, the last time I coded, I learned Elixir and I was on an Elixir project. That was honestly like a year and a half ago. It's been a while since I've touched code because I've been forced into doing this other stuff. So I do it on the weekends. I do it for fun. I still like technology. I have a lot of friends that are still in it, so I talk to them about what they're working on. And I just find the things that are interesting to me. So understanding where you want to keep your technology chops is really important because there's just this vast domain of places where you can be technical. So focusing in first and foremost on where you want to kind of continue to be not an expert, but understanding is important. I'd say the other thing is there's this assumption that you're going to get in a situation where people don't respect you anymore or your technical abilities. The reality is I've never seen that happen. As even the CTOs that I work with, they're not hyper technical, but they can go in a room and because they've been in the industry for long enough, they have coded for a duration of time, and they've just heard the conversations, they see the patterns. The thing that all of you are going to be fantastic at, no matter what, no matter how far you get from the code, is you have learned patterns. You've learned abstractions, you've learned ways to see problems and solutions, and that's what you're going to get paid big bucks for, right? Is to be able to go into a room and say, oh, I don't know the details of that React thing you're talking about, but the general problem that you're describing to me, I get that. So here's what I need from you. I need you to go look at the different frameworks that are, what is the trade-off if we rewrite it in React versus if we
let's say, intelligence on average business experience?
To code?
You know, to have this, what you're doing now, to manage the developers team.
It's all interest. I mean, I think again, it's like if your purpose is to work in technology and to do bigger and more interesting, impactful things in technology, you're just going to naturally do this work because it's interesting to you, right? Like you have a lot of options in a company to do whatever you want. So it's important to just find the thing that drives you and go after it. So yeah, I think anyone, all of you are highly intelligent. All of you are spending your Saturday at a technical conference. Like none of you are going to have a problem being great at your jobs. So it's just figuring out where do you want to be great? What drives you? What do you want your purpose to be? Where do you want to have the biggest impact? And then think through how you can have that impact. Is it as a chief architect? Is it as a, product manager? Is it as a, manager of 4 teams? Like figure out where you want to be and then think through the path to get there.
Okay.
Thank you all.
Thank you, Carter. Hope to see you soon again in Croatia.
Yeah.